Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CPAC Live. We have a great show for you today. We're going to be joined by a great Pennsylvania congressman, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, and by Buck Sexton, one of the greatest Twitter handles there are, and someone that really understands what's going on around the globe and the political implications here in America, especially with that wonderful day at the White House with all these signing ceremonies and making history. Only 4 of these such agreements in 47 years of Israel's existence. And what a big day. And, you know, we're going to be having our CPAC in Washington, Pennsylvania. Having just come back from Washington, Iowa, you realize how much Washington is important to the history of the country still. And the people in these towns, I'm sure in Pennsylvania, will be the same. And we'll talk to the congressman about it. But I bet the people in Washington, Pennsylvania are very proud of their namesake. And so we're going to be in Pennsylvania on Saturday. We have an all-star lineup. As I said, we're going to have Congressman Reschenthaler. We're going to have Diamond and Silk. KT McFarland, one of our board members, is obviously going to be talking about what's going on overseas. Sarah Carter, Gordon Chang, who always focuses specifically on China, in Asia generally, and what's going on in Hong Kong. We're going to have Congressman G.T. Thompson, this great candidate we heard from at the Republican National Committee, Sean Parnell, our great vice chairman, Charlie Giroux, who himself once ran for Congress in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's going to be an all-star lineup. You won't want to miss it. You can still get tickets. We have a nice big venue so people can spread out and do it in a way that's safe. Go to our website at conservative.org. We all need to get together and talk about the state of our country. And we need to not just get together. We have to talk about how we're going to win important states like the state of Pennsylvania. And I've been looking at the polls across the country, including in Pennsylvania, although I haven't seen a poll come out for a number of days. And I would just caution you to get inside. If you have time, actually read the poll. Sometimes they'll put the whole poll out. From an ethics point of view, they're supposed to always put the whole poll out. Some of these media companies don't do that. They cherry pick the bad news for our side. And the good news in most of these polls is they are keeping the sample of Democrats, the projection of Republicans who will turn out in November in the 25% range, which is way low. I've talked to the president's pollsters, one of whom is on our board, Jim McLaughlin, and you really want to be looking at polls that have at least a 33% turnout model for Republicans. And as you know, Donald Trump has been able to unify Republicans and conservatives more than any other Republican nominee in modern times. So we're very united, despite the fact you read this ridiculousness coming from the Lincoln Project or these other they're really swamp Republicans who struck out in Trump's Washington, D.C. And now they think they'll have better career prospects under Joe Biden, or they just don't agree with what the Republican Party really believes in anymore. And if they don't, that's okay. It's a free country. They can leave the party. But our party's actually growing, which is a great thing. So Pennsylvania is key. And when I talk to Charlie Giroux and other people that really understand what's going on in Pennsylvania, what I usually hear is Trump is stronger this time than last time. Now, he only won by 44,000 votes or so last time. So I would say it's no time to be cocky about Pennsylvania. And Joe Biden obviously was born in Scranton. And as the president loves to say, he abandoned Scranton 7 decades ago or so. So anyway, we're going to be talking a lot about Pennsylvania on the show today. We're going to obviously be in Pennsylvania on Saturday. And then after Saturday, I'm jumping on an airplane and I'm heading to Michigan with one of our colleagues here, Jonathan Moy. And we're going to join the Trump bus, and we're going to go all around Michigan and talk to the people of Michigan, another critical state. But the first guest we have today, Congressman Reschenthaler, is joining us now. I don't know where you are, sir, but it's great to have you on CPAC Live.
Well, Matt, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to join you. And I'm in my D.C. office. We're in session today, so I'm coming at you live from D.C.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What is Nancy Pelosi's phony, fake, kind of spinning on the fact that she's negotiating another version of Corona bailout? or Corona aid. She's really not. There's really no negotiations going on, right? I mean, this is a fake deal.
It's absolutely a fake deal, and it's all a distraction from what's going on. Let's just back up. We have to remember that it was the Senate Republicans, it was Mitch McConnell, who put forth what we would call a skinny package to get aid to people right away. He is the one that put that forward. It was Senate Republicans. It was the Senate Democrats who used cloture to block debate on that package. So the Democrats are actually the ones that are blocking any progress on this package. And man, it's very simple why that is. It's because that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in the far left wing of the Democrat Party have decided they're going to put politics above policy. They're going to use the American people, those struggling during this pandemic, they're going to use those individuals as pawns in their sick political game, and they're going to deny relief to these individuals because they think it will help them come November. It's very twisted and sad, and we need to call her out on doing this, Nancy Pelosi, that is.
Yeah, I mean, there are two parties, and I always think it's interesting when the Democrats grab control over the House, they act like the Republicans shouldn't have any voice in any of these negotiations. There's a Republican majority in the Senate, and obviously Donald Trump is president. Both sides have to negotiate with each other. And I want to ask you this question. You obviously have a lot of Democratic colleagues. You have more Democratic colleagues, unfortunately, than Republican colleagues. I actually think we're going to see a massive shift after November's election. I don't know if you are as optimistic as I am, but I think the pressure on these negotiations and the pressure generally on Nancy Pelosi is going to be evidenced in the next 2 weeks as more of these kind of fake moderate freshman Democrats who ran saying they wouldn't vote for Nancy Pelosi and her extremism have then voted with her, not only to be speaker, but voted with her down the line in most of these issues. You have races like that in Pennsylvania where people said that they weren't going to support her. What do you agree with me that in about 2 weeks, these Democrats are going to start to get polls that show that in these Trump districts, they're actually not in a very good position for re-election. And I think some panic is going to ensue.
Matt, you're absolutely correct. They're going to start to see the internal polling. They're going to see the president doing much better than they anticipated. And let's just back up to what you mentioned about these fake moderate Democrats. There's no such thing as a moderate blue dog Democrat anymore. There may have been one, Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey, and he's now a Republican, right? It's because the Democrats are expected to vote with Nancy Pelosi well over 90% of the time. If they step out of line, she brings the hammer down on them. So all the Democrats, no matter what they say on the campaign trail, no matter what they say in their TV ads, when they get to D.C., they're in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi. That's why when people talk about the squad, it drives me nuts. That minimizes the far left wing of the party. It's not a squad. It is over half of their conference supports radical ideas like the Green New Deal. And we could talk about that. But if you're in one of these swing districts that's represented by a Democrat, that Trump won that district, we call them battlegrounds or swing districts, look at that Democrat's voting record. I will bet you any amount of money that Democrat voted well over 90% of the time with Nancy Pelosi, well over 90% of the time with AOC Omar Tlaib. Do not get distracted by the so-called squad. They're all members of the social justice Democrat left. Now, if you look at our chances of taking back the House, they're actually really good. We have 30 seats out there that are held by Democrats in seats that Trump won. Again, the swing districts, the battleground districts that I just referred to. We only have to do better than half to pick up those seats. We pick up 17 seats. We have Speaker Kevin McCarthy and not Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It would be a huge victory for conservatives. And then where we are on the defense, we only have 3 seats right now where we're playing defense. One's in Pennsylvania with Brian Fitzpatrick. He's doing incredibly well. What is in Syracuse, New York, with John Katko? He also is ahead in the polls. And then we have a really interesting race along the border in Texas, where we had Representative Hurd, who resigned. We have an amazing candidate, Tony Gonzalez. He's a young guy. He was a Master Chief in the Navy, which is the highest rank an enlisted man can attain. It's huge. He's very young. He's very dynamic. I predict that Tony Gonzalez will win that seat. So we will keep all 3 of our battleground seats. We only then have to pick up just over half of the Democrat battleground seats, and I think we're going to do it.
But you go back to Trump America. So what ended up happening is I always say that, yes, there's the Republican Party, but we're really a coalition now. You have people that go to CPACs, like will come visit us in Washington, Pennsylvania, who aren't registered Republicans. They're more conservative than they are anything else. So you have Republicans, you have conservatives, and then you have these Trump supporters. And some of these Trump supporters are with Trump because of one or two or three issues they just love him on. And maybe they disagree with the Republican Party on other parts of our of our policy platform. And what I see is great harmony amongst all three, more harmony than I've ever really seen in politics, mostly because Trump has made a believer in these folks that this kind of new outsider approach can work. And but for those just Trump folks, right? They dropped off in 2018. There's no question. Millions of votes, 6 and 8 million votes disappeared because, they just didn't love what they were seeing from the Republican House that was being shepherded by Paul Ryan. They just kept reading all these stories that there were disagreements with the Trump White House. And what I think Kevin McCarthy has done is really synced up both the House is in stride with the White House and vice versa. And we're not going to see that drop off of votes. Matter of fact, you could even see a spike of votes. Are you seeing that in your district, that this coalition is working well with each other?
I do see that. And my district is very similar to a lot of these other districts where you have a Democrat majority. So, Matt, people don't realize this, but my district, I have 50,000 more Democrats than Republicans. Yet my district in 2016 voted for Trump by roughly 29%. And we have surveys out there where we think that Trump is actually going to outperform that 29%. He's probably going to do better in my district. So,
why do you say that? Is that because of this? The city's on fire, cops being assassinated, the extremism that we've seen coming from the protests after the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, that it's just too much for people, including Democrats?
It's a combination of all the above, right? So let's just go back to 2016 in my district. You had people who were very socially conservative, right? They're pro-life, they're pro-Second Amendment. The Obama-Biden administration did not reflect their values. The Obama administration also declared war on coal, was very harsh on natural gas and fracking, which is huge in Western Pennsylvania. So for all those reasons, I would say economic and cultural reasons, a lot of those voters changed over and voted for Trump, even though they remain Democrat in terms of registration. In terms of voting, they're Republican. Now, this time around, you still have those elements. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are clearly out of step on any kind of cultural conservative platform, without question. Also, they're talking about going back on the war on coal, shutting down coal plants, banning fracking. Joe Biden may have come to Pittsburgh and said he's against banning fracking, but we have him dead to rights on 6 occasions on tape where he says he wants to ban fracking. You also you have those.
Can I interrupt you with 1 second? He doesn't just want to ban fracking. He wants to eliminate fossil fuels. He says, I want to eliminate fossil fuels, and then tries to convince us he doesn't want to ban fracking. I mean, the man that you got, in politics, you got to stick with your line, and he's not doing a very good job of that.
It's exactly right. And let me just come back to that. But if I can just talk about some of the other issues you have, as you mentioned, the chaos, the public safety issue.
Right.
As we start seeing places throughout the country, Kenosha, obviously Seattle, Portland, now Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right? A sleepy community, an exurb of Philadelphia being lit up by these violent protesters. That's not going to sit well with the demographic that George Bush would call the security moms in the suburbs. Those security mothers, those that are swing voters in the suburbs, are going to vote for safety. And I think you're going to see that play out as well. And then let's not forget about COVID. I think a lot of Democrat governors, particularly Governor Wolf in my state, grossly mismanaged this crisis. And I think that when you have President Trump and you have examples like my friend Ron DeSantis in Florida, of course, and you show in contrast how they handled this pandemic vis-a-vis the Democrat governors. Also, the fact that President Trump is not afraid to hold China accountable for this virus and other transgressions, which we can talk about. All those factors are going to play in bringing swing voters over and energizing the base. And the old coalition where you had the true blue dog Democrats on the ground with I would call maybe your Main Street Republicans, right? That coalition is still there. We're a big tent party. The Democrats are the party that have the litmus test. They're the ones that push out people like Jeff Van Drew, who may have a different opinion. But with that, Matt, that's why I'm optimistic that we are going to take back the House, retain the Senate, and I think that Trump will win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania might be the childhood home of Joe Biden, but it's going to be the home of another 20 electoral votes for President Trump.
Is that what it is? Is it 20 votes?
20 electoral votes. People don't realize how big Pennsylvania is.
It's huge.
We're the 5th largest state. For whatever reason, when I tell people that we have 18 Congress men and women, they're always shocked. Pennsylvania is a really big state.
That's because you're the only northeastern state that isn't shedding everybody and they're not fleeing. Maybe if Governor Wolf gets reelected, unfortunately, that trend will move to Pennsylvania. But I also, what I love is your governor has been quite a faulty leader, including on this question of Chinese corona and shutdowns. And what I love is a Trump judge recently just really slapped him down over this idea that somehow your Supreme Court and your governor can abridge your First Amendment rights, your ability to worship as you please, your ability to assemble. Matter of fact, they were basically telling us that having a CPAC in Pennsylvania would be illegal. And this great judge, this newly appointed judge, William Stickman, on the federal bench, picked by Donald Trump, said basically, you don't have the right to, in some kind of willy-nilly fashion, clamp down on people's First Amendment rights. What was your reaction to this really bold decision?
Well, first, let me say this to all the never Trumpers out there that did not want to support Trump. You should have supported Trump for judges like Bill Stickman. Had you not had President Trump in office, you would not have these young judges. Bill Stickman is roughly my age, late 30s, a true conservative. You saw that in his opinion. But again, if you were never Trump or if you didn't support President Trump, we would not have these judicial nominees, these judicial appointments to actually uphold conservative values. Now, talking about Bill Stickman's decision, it's incredible. It reads like a second Bill of Rights. It encapsulates exactly what happened with this pandemic, that Democrats, for some reason, thought that the Bill of Rights and other constitutional protections were somehow only meant for fair weather days. And I believe Bill Stickman actually says that in the opinion. And he does a really good job of paraphrasing Ben Franklin's famous quote. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically saying that if you would give up your security or give up freedom for security, you'll get neither and deserve neither. Now, obviously, Bill Stickman and Ben Franklin were much more articulate than me, but that is really the idea of Bill Stickman's opinion. And legally, he's absolutely correct. What Governor Wolf did was very capricious. It was arbitrary. It was ad hoc. There was little rational basis in many of the actions he took. Forgive me for speaking like a lawyer at this point, but in terms of a legal analysis, he really overplayed his hand. It did not apply the law in any terms of fairness or equity, and he violated people's First Amendment rights, their equal protection rights, and so forth. So thankfully, we have a judge that is called Governor Wolf on this. We'll see what happens when it gets up to the Third Circuit, but I think that Bill Stickman is onto something here, and thankfully you had some counties in Western Pennsylvania that pushed back on the draconian orders of Governor Wolf.
So our CPAC in Washington, Pennsylvania is going to be street legal, folks. You are still allowed to participate in politics in America despite what these socialist governors are trying to do and trying to stop the Trump campaign. You can see when the president lands in these battleground states, their overflow crowds are amazing at these, whatever they're calling them now. They're essentially rallies at airports and airport hangars. And that's exactly where we're going to be, at an airport hangar just off I-70. People need to have a real presidential campaign. They need to make sure that these candidates have the wherewithal to answer the tough questions. The president showed that last night in Philadelphia with George Stephanopoulos, and Joe Biden has basically not demonstrated his ability to stand up there and answer the tough questions. He showed up in in Florida, 90 minutes late to a Hispanic crowd down there. It doesn't answer questions of the press by and large at any events. When he does answer questions from the press, the great Bret Baier asked his spokesperson, is he getting the questions and is he reading the answers? And the spokesperson for the Biden campaign said, we will not answer questions fed to you by the Trump campaign. Basically, they won't deny the fact that they feed the answers to Joe Biden on the teleprompter so he can give the answers. So this is the final question for you, Congressman. I've asked you some really tough questions. do you have a teleprompter there that that we're feeding you the answers, or are you actually speaking off the top of your mind?
I do not have a teleprompter here, Matt. I'm
Good for
speaking
you.
off the top of my mind. Right. All answers are my own and unfiltered.
That's the way it should be. And by the way, it's okay in politics. Sometimes a politician will give an answer that's a little off. Voters appreciate authenticity, the fact that you're looking at them in the eyes and giving them an answer. And we shouldn't elect a president with lower standards than that.
It's absolutely correct. And you know what? The way Joe Biden is running this campaign, if he were elected, that's the way his administration is going to be run. They're going to hide him in the basement of the White House. And it's going to be a bunch of extreme social justice warrior liberals that are controlling the show, calling the shots. I say the only decision Joe Biden is allowed to make during the day is how he's going to take his coffee in the morning. If you think this guy's in control, you're kidding yourself. So we've got to remember that we're voting for a platform, just not a person. Joe Biden might come across as avuncular sometimes, harmless at times. Don't fall for that, because his handlers, his controllers really want to dismantle. They want to defund. They want to destroy our way of life.
I appreciate an old guy that thinks he's still got it, but I don't know if he's behind that barn, if he's going to be able to take you out, Congressman. He keeps telling us he's going to beat everybody up behind the barn. I find that a very strange thing. But anyway, that's one of the messages that's coming out loud and clear. We're really excited to be with you on Saturday. I know that you have important remarks to convey to the great crowd that's going to be there, including on China and other questions. I know you said you're on the China task force for Leader McCarthy, who I hope to be Speaker McCarthy in just a matter of months here. But we appreciate all the great work you do. Thanks for helping us with the event. Thanks for appearing with us on CPAC Live. And go tell Nancy Pelosi we're on to her, okay?
Will do, Matt. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
All right, great, Congressman. We're going to be right back with Buck Sexton after this short video.
We're here this afternoon to change the course of history. After decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. Together, these agreements will serve as the foundation for a comprehensive peace across the entire region, something which nobody thought was possible. For generations, the people of the Middle East have been held back by old conflicts, hostilities. These agreements prove that the nations of the region are breaking free from the failed approaches of the past. Today's signing sets history on a new course. Today, the world sees that they're choosing cooperation over conflict, friendship over enmity, prosperity over poverty, and hope over despair. They are choosing a future in which Arabs and Israelis, Muslims, Jews, and Christians can live together, pray together, and dream together, side by side in harmony, community, and peace. Once again, let me congratulate the people of Israel, the people of the United Arab Emirates, and the people of the Kingdom of Bahrain. God bless you all. This is an incredible day for the world.
Well, what a historic day it was at the White House yesterday with the signing ceremony and the pageantry and this idea of an outsider's approach to foreign policy and trying different things, new ways to try to make a difference. And I was just kind of proud of our president yesterday, and was glad that it was almost like a little break from presidential politics too, to remind folks that we are electing a president. We're not electing just like either the donkey or the elephant. We're electing a person that has to make sure that America is ably led during these most dangerous of times. And somebody who understands that very well is the host of the Buck Sexton Show, the aforementioned Buck Sexton, who really has great experience. One of the reasons why I really enjoy reading what Buck writes and following him on Twitter and listening to his show, which you can get anywhere you listen to and download podcasts, is the fact that he worked for both the CIA and the NYPD as an analyst. And, both of these entities, the CIA is under attack from its own wrongdoing, and the NYPD is under attack for reasons I still cannot ascertain. But Buck Sexton, thanks for being with us on CPAC Live.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
Okay, so you're in New York. What the hell is going on up there?
It's a mess. We are still under kind of lockdown here, even though we've been below 1% in terms of COVID positive tests for over a month now. There's a lot of competing theories as to why this is. It's not because we're all wearing masks so well now. I know that like libs and Democrats want to believe that. Much more likely that New York got hit so badly by COVID the first time around, in my opinion, what I'm reading from actual experts who are looking at this honestly, that we're closer to herd immunity here, just at least in the New York area, than people previously recognized. We'll see if that bears out, if that's true this winter. It could, in fact, be something else. But then you got the crime issue, too. We've got skyrocketing shootings, murders. Now, look, compared to what it was when I was a kid here in New York over 20 years ago, that was a lot worse. But you got to look at crime year to year, and the trend is what is so troubling. And it's all because cops have been demonized, and the BLM movement is an anti-cop movement, which we now see. It's pretty clear.
I grew up outside of New York in a town called Burnsville, New Jersey, for a brief time, for 4 years as a kid, and my parents were born and raised in New York. And I remember in the 70s, which is, you probably weren't even born yet, Buck. But anyway, I remember in the 70s that, my parents, even though they were born in New York, if we had to go into the city, they were concerned because they had little kids and it was unsafe. And there was whole places that you would never even think about going. I remember my mom saying to me, don't go here, don't go there. It's just not safe. I remember being with my uncle one time and coming off a bus and coming off a subway and walking up the steps, and he just turned right around and we all went right back there and got back on the subway. I mean, it was a dangerous place. And through able leadership of a couple of mayors, Ed Koch, and obviously America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and then a lot of investment, the city came back. But this is a high wire act. You just can't guarantee that that's going to be able to happen.
No, in fact, I think it's likely to get worse. And I mean, I'm really, with the exception of a few years in D.C. and at the CIA and then going down there for work, I've been a New Yorker my whole life, living here in New York City. And the trajectory here is what I think has so many people concerned, because you got to add a few things together. And this is playing out for people like, oh, this is New York. This is happening in Los Angeles now. It's happening in San Francisco now. It's happening in Chicago, which they hadn't really seen quite the same way. The downtown is starting to empty out. The vacancy rate for apartments is climbing because it's not safe. But so then you get into the spiral, right? Exactly what you talked about. I remember that. Matt, when I was growing up, if you went into Central Park at night and you got robbed or mugged, people would say, not, oh my gosh, you were robbed. They'd say, what were you doing in Central Park?
They'd say, it serves you right. What were you doing there?
They're like, well, what are you thinking? And that was in, that's a park that, for those who don't know, is pretty much, in the safest, highest retail, or highest real estate investment value area of the whole city. And this is now what we're seeing. People are scared of the crime, so then they move out to the burbs. As a result of people leaving who are scared of the crime, you also have the flight of the tax base that's necessary to pay for all this stuff, because New York has a massive welfare state that's specific to the city, never mind the federal welfare state. All the public housing and there's federal dollars that go to it, but there's also a lot of city dollars that go to these programs. And then people say, okay, so it's got high crime and they're gouging me on taxes. I'm going to get out of here too. So more and more people start to leave, go to the burbs, look for better schools. The schools start to deteriorate because the tax base flees, because good, productive, law-abiding people are concerned. So it creates this downward spiral effect. And libs are going to turn around and say, oh, it's not that bad in New York right now. This is what de Blasio says, the mayor here. But if you look at what's happening in California and New York State, those are the two best examples of this. The outflow is real. They are hemorrhaging residents, and it's because of these Democrat policies. There's no other way around it.
I mean, this is the thing. You literally have a presidential campaign. You have Joe Biden and his advisors embracing the most extreme policies. They're trying to change all the titles, right? Oh, no, I never said I was for the Green New Deal. I just don't want to have any fracking or any fossil fuels. Oh, I'm not for Medicare for all. I just want Obamacare Plus, which is the same thing with a different name. Like, they think we're stupid and we don't know that he's embraced all the policies. So while Joe Biden has embraced all the socialist policies, we're watching in our big cities them play out. High taxes, ridiculous regulations telling you how much soda you can drink in a day, all these mandates on what you can do in this era of corona, which is basically nothing unless a federal judge intervenes, as that great judge did in Pennsylvania. And what you see is competent, functional people fleeing all those cities you mentioned, sadly enough, including the place where I am here, Washington, D.C., people just start to flee because if you can't raise kids in a safe environment, give them a decent education, and you can't walk down the street without thinking you might get your head blown off. And finally, and you know this too well personally, if cops are on the defense, because if they make one tough subjective decision, their careers are destroyed, their pensions are taken away, and when they're being defunded and their salaries are being cut, you know, that means the cops will not respond to these terrible crime emergencies.
No, that's absolutely true. And I speak to people here in the NYPD about morale. It's the largest municipal police force in the entire country. You know, I think it's like in the top 30 or top 40 standing armies in the world. It's almost 40,000 in size. They always use this statistic to tell people, give you a sense of how big the department is. But officers feel like all that has to happen is they have to wrestle a non-compliant suspect, someone who's resisting arrest, wrestle them, and you know they put a video up on the internet. And here's the thing: arrests, when people won't go quietly, it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look good. And if you only see 10 seconds of it and you don't see what led up to it, you may think, ooh, that looks a little bit like excessive force. And when you're in a political environment where the de Blasios and the Garcettis and the Lori Lightfoots, and you know, when you're in an environment where they just want to placate that anti-cop sentiment of the Democrat base, cops are going to get thrown under the bus. Cops are going to be are going to get fired before we even know what happened. Cops are going to be ruined, and that affects all of their perceptions about what they can do in their job, how supported they are by the public, and it's terrible for all of us. I will also say one more thing to add into all this. You know, cities, and I've been a big city proponent. I've been a big defender of New York for a long time, despite all the downside. That once Giuliani came along and cleaned this place up, I mean, it was like Disneyland. It was the best restaurants in the world. It's actually was very safe for the Giuliani and Bloomberg years. And I give Bloomberg credit, even though he's annoying about the sodas, and I agree with you. The city functioned pretty well, and it was pretty safe during those Bloomberg years too. But now, why even be in a city? And, you know, this is the Democrat power base. So there are major political implications to this, too. Right. It's cities is where they derive the majority of their political support in most of these big states. People are leaving these cities, though, and they're saying, why do I have to be here if I can work remotely? So when you add together high taxes, high crime, remote working option, the American metropolis is changing. Yeah. Now, I don't think people aren't going to live in cities, but I think they're going to be moving from New York to Nashville, from LA to Orlando. I mean, that's what I think is in the process of occurring right now. And it's going to have seismic changes for the country's politics.
I think that what we're going to see in Texas, in Florida, in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, in these states is just booming numbers of people in migration from these dysfunctional cities. And, you know, I'm a Midwesterner. I said I grew up outside of New York City for 4 years, but I ended up in Wichita, Kansas. And what I realized, when you go to a city of about, 300,000 to 500,000, it's very functional. It's very manageable for the city officials. You can have a great way of life. And I always wondered why it seemed like all the young people wanted to go to cities where they couldn't really afford to live unless they had really spectacular jobs. And within short order, this trend of rural America, being dissipated by all the young people wanting to live in the big cities is interesting. Now you're seeing people say, well, wait a minute, maybe it wasn't so bad to be able to buy a house and have a little bit of land, maybe a car. I think this is a great opportunity for red states to continue with low taxes, less regulation, a lot of freedom, and you know what else? Some decency, some manners. You can go to church and not feel like someone's going to come whack the head off a statue.
No, look, this is all true, and I think that we're just seeing the beginnings of this, because as more people go and bring back tales to their former blue state neighbors about what it's really like to be in a place where you pay zero income tax, where you can have the right to bear arms. I mean, I think about this. I've got a family member who's in the process right now of moving to Texas. Lifelong New York City. When I say New Yorker, New York City resident like me. He's moving to Texas, and he's like, you know what, Buck? This is amazing. I'm not looking at renting a one-bedroom apartment. I'm looking at buying a house I could live in forever. I'm looking at getting an AR, looking at getting a couple of Glocks, and I'm just going to go get them, and it'll be fine. I don't have to fill out 6 months worth of paperwork and waiting and nonsense, and no one's going to come knocking on my door looking for them. I'm going to get a big yellow lab, and I'm going to pay zero income tax. And I'm
That's awesome.
and I'm like, starting to be pretty good, because you brought up, why do people live in the cities before? Jobs, honestly, for young guys, at least I could say, the dating pool, just more people, and the sense of excitement and connectivity you have with people. But in the virtual world we live in now, man, a lot of that, you can buy anything you want on Amazon. You can get on, Match.com or Tinder or whatever, and meet whoever you want to meet in whatever part of the country you're in. And you can do work from home so much more than ever before. So I think the proposition that cities used to be able to give people to justify, I mean, I tell people what the rents are in New York City, and they think I'm exaggerating or it's a joke, or, and I always tell them it's about twice as expensive for what you get as like Washington, D.C., which is an expensive city. And now I think people are going to say it's not worth it, Matt. And that makes for a very different feeling country, as I said, politically, demographically, in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is what I want. I want conservatives, and I might be one of them, although I have obligations here in New York professionally right now. But Florida, Texas, I'm worried that these states are going to get turned blue by people who are leaving the badly run blue states.
Right.
In this place.
No, it's a real concern, and you hear about that from those folks. But I think Nevada's a real test case in all of this. Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, still wields a big political stick out there in Nevada. But interestingly enough, they elected a socialist governor who beat our great board member, Adam Laxalt, unfortunately. I'm sure Adam will be back at that game again soon. But they have basically a shutdown order. It's like no more than 10 people anywhere. We went through it with the Trump bus. And, we had smaller crowds on purpose because we were trying to not get shut down. But everywhere we went, Buck, the cops who were there to kind of police us ended up taking pictures with us in front of the bus. I won't mention any names. I don't want anyone to get fired. But and then the other thing is, because of the shutdown and all those hotels and casinos, it's interesting, the people fled. If there's no job in Las Vegas, these union voters, by and large, who were controlled by the Harry Reid machine, they fled. So although we're concerned about people coming into states and making them worse, and there's a lot of California out-migration, and the people in Nevada, if you were to talk to them, they're worried that they're going to be blue voters. But most of the Californians I've seen and talked to that have gone to Nevada, they now despise socialism. So maybe there's a more optimistic view. Maybe in this process of failure, the American people are learning.
I would love for that to be true, and it's certainly a plausible.
Well, we'll know in November, right? We'll know.
Yeah, I think you're right about Nevada as a test case, because people, I've spoken to lifelong Los Angelinos who are just like, this is too much. Like the taxes, the people, urinating on the street and living in tents, and the traffic, and the power grid. You go down the list there. California is, and the thing is, people say, oh, you wouldn't, California's a failed state, it's so dangerous. It takes a while to destroy a place with as many God-given gifts. The geography, the natural resources of the state of California. This is like the fatted cow that they have slowly milked and now slaughtered, right? It takes a while, but they've gotten to the point where I think people realize. I think, by the way, Matt, and we can mark this one down, I think Trump is going to flip 2 states this time around that didn't go red the last time. I think he's going to flip Nevada. I think he's going to flip New Hampshire.
I agree with both those. And I think in New Hampshire, I think this assault on guns, which is happening in all these states, like in my state now, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I think in juxtaposition with all the crime that's happening all over. Plus, New Hampshire has had a lot of these people move in from Massachusetts and Boston, and they see that they don't want these policies nationwide, right? They've experienced that. They have a very popular Republican governor, Chris Sununu. I'm going to make another prediction. Okay, so Buck Sexton just made a prediction that's closely akin to some of the things I've been saying. I also think that there's a decent chance now that Kevin McCarthy could wield the gavel. All we have to do is pick up 17 seats in Trump districts. And I think the Democrats are on the run because I don't think they've provided much of an agenda. I think what they've provided is impeachment and Trump hate. So you've made your prediction. I've made mine. I don't know if I'm close to saying I put $1 million on the fact that the gavel's going to switch. I think we're going to be right in that zone, though.
Can I make a contingent prediction? Not to sit here. I know we're not a prognostication show, but if you happen to not be right about McCarthy, and of course I hope you are, I don't know, and as you said, you think it's going to be close. If the Democrats hold the House, I don't believe that they will certify the election results. I don't think the Democrat-held House, they're going to at least play games with that. I think that's going to be one of their moves.
What I worry about is that they don't hold the majority, but yet they have that vote before the Republican majority can be sworn in. So I think there could be a lot of shenanigans to come, which is why flipping states is really important for the president. And just so everyone knows, as I said at the top of the show, we're off to CPAC, Pennsylvania, and Washington on Saturday. I'm off to Michigan on the Trump bus. We're going to travel all throughout Michigan. I'm going to get quite a Michigan education. Then I'm moving on to Ohio, and we have a whole series of CPACs. Buck, you got to come with us to some of these CPACs. We're going to be in Florida. We're going to be in North Carolina. We're going to be in Minnesota again. So we're going to spend all the treasury and expend all of our energy. I think it's a fight worth having. We're calling it America versus socialism. And we know that you understand what that means, Buck Sexton. We appreciate you joining us here today.
Matt, great to see you, man. Thanks for all you do with CPAC.
Oh, I love it. It's been a historic change in our country over the last 5 or 6 years, and I think CPAC has played a constructive role. So thanks for that comment, and thanks all of you for tuning in. Remember, get your tickets to CPAC Pennsylvania. Go to conservative.org immediately. They will not be available for too much longer, so sign up, and we'll see you on Saturday. And y'all have a great day.